Hi, boosters. Welcome to our Boosted Volunteer webinar today on Booster Club engagement. Today, we're going to talk about how to boost your volunteer base and how to increase your sponsorships in your organization. So, two really big parts of engagement. I'm Robin Eisler. I'm the founder and CEO of Booster Hub. We're a software application built specifically for booster clubs, and we love to share tips and tricks on how to run your booster club like a champ. So we'll get started here and share these great ideas with you. If you attend our live webinars, you'll have the opportunity to collaborate with other boosters and ask questions in our chat. And we also include special offers at the end. So this is one of our recorded versions, but if you have the opportunity, please join us sometime on a live webinar. So volunteer burnout is the number one reason that booster clubs struggle. And this starts, at the top, from one person doing it all to not being able to get enough volunteers. And it's really the most common complaint of booster clubs. We hear it every single day. So I want to walk with you through a plan today for how to build your volunteer base. It's not a one-stop trick that's going to fix everything, but it's going to give you a plan to slowly build that base over a period of time so that when you get to your big events, you have enough people to do everything that you need to do. So let's talk about the volunteer challenge. So what we hear all the time is we have the same 5 people doing everything. People sign up, but they don't show up. No one wants to take a leadership role, and we need more volunteers. So this is common across all booster clubs. Don't feel like you're alone. We see and hear this all the time. The best way to fix this is through a strategic plan that helps build your booster volunteer base over time. And then we've got some tips and tricks for how to add on just little bits in the immediate future. And then we're also going to go through the sponsor challenge. So what we hear is our local sponsors are tapped too often. We ask the same businesses every year, which is not a bad thing. We don't have much to offer the sponsors, or we don't have a way to show our value. So we're going to walk through some ways that you can do that today and give you some strategic plans for both your volunteer base and your sponsorships so that you can really boost the engagement in your booster club. So let's start with the volunteer challenge. So the strategy that I really like to use for boosting volunteers is it's really a comprehensive plan. And I hate to say things like that because it's kind of scary, but that's where you need to start, is with a big plan for how you're going to do this. So first of all, you have to map out the need. How many volunteers do you need to fill all your board positions, to fill all your volunteer slots throughout the year? And then you need to define that into actual individual roles. And then you can get an idea for how many people you actually need to volunteer to get all the work done of your booster club. Then you need to make your ask effective. And we're going to talk about various ways to do that. And then I like to do something called retention through appreciation. So this is where you really build programs to appreciate and thank your booster volunteers, helps get them build more community and get them excited, and so that they'll come back next year. And then my most favorite trick in a booster club for a lot of things is 100% participation. So we'll talk about some ways to do that. So let's start with mapping the needs. So first of all, you're going to want to break down the list of all the roles in your booster club. So you want to start with your booster club board, and then any particular position that you need that's a broad position. So you don't need to get down to we need a slot to run the ice machine at the concession stand. That's not what I'm talking about here. But we need a concession chair, and we need a concession co-chair or concession elect. And we have 5 spots on our board. And then we need someone to oversee merchandise or spiritware and things like that. So you want to break down the list and then define the roles. And I'll show you some examples of that in a few minutes. And then you're going to want to publish that need so everyone is aware of it. Sometimes when you're working in a booster club, you get really head down and focused, and you see booster club stuff every day. So you think, gosh, everyone should know that it takes, 1,200 volunteer slots to run our program for the year. But what I find is a lot of your typical families, they've got kids in school, they're working, there's a lot of information flying by. They don't recognize the need. So you're really going to have to inform them of the need. So when we look at the specific roles, what I recommend is that you make chairs. So you're going to have your booster club officers, and then you're going to have chairs for each major thing that your booster club does. So if you run a concession stand, you should need a concession chair. If you do a big fundraising event, you should have, fundraising event chair. If you do spirit wear, you should have a spirit wear chair. Now it seems at first like, why am I making all these roles? I can't get any volunteers. Well, trust me, just going through this process of creating the role and then defining what it does is going to help you get people to fill that role. I also recommend making an elect, especially for any of your major positions. So, what this does is when you have a new freshman parent coming in, they don't know what to do. You're like, I'm going to make you the concession elect. And then you're going to work with our experienced concession person, and you're going to get to understand the role. And what this does is it builds a great pipeline for your booster club. So, you're never left with big gaps in your pipeline for volunteers. Any major event like a banquet or a season kickoff or a dinner or a concert or a tournament should have a chair. So these events get to have so much detail in them, particularly you as the Booster Club president. It's not a role that you should be serving. You should find someone in the organization that can chair that event for you. So you're going to want to write job descriptions for each of these roles. So let's take a look at that. This is an actual list of job descriptions from a real booster club. This is a sports team. And they've broken down their roles into their board positions and then some elect positions. They've got even their member at large on here, concession chair, concession lead, which is basically a concession elect, charity fundraiser, season kickoff, banquet, etc. The other thing they've done is talk about what that job entails. And then they've given the time commitment for that job and also when you need to do it. So, there's some booster club roles that are year round. Certainly, your major board positions, you have to have meetings and things and you operate year round. But things like concession, it's a really intense job for a really short period of time. And some people like that. So, if you define the time commitment, it helps people decide if they can take it on. I definitely recommend giving titles. So, titles are effective. People like them. They like to say, I'm the chair of this, I'm the head of that. The title combined with the description gives people ownership of the role, and giving them ownership gets people excited about doing them and it makes them accountable. And that helps take some of the burden off you as the Booster Club board member. Again, we talked about adding skills that are helpful. So, for instance, I like to make the vice president in charge of fundraising because it's such a big job, and make sure that they have some fundraising experience or suggest that they have fundraising experience. Again, make the roles 2 levels deep. So, you have like a treasurer and a treasurer elect. And you can even add the benefit of the role. So, you know, participating in the booster club, being on the board, it has benefits. So if you're the concession chair, for example, you get to determine what food is sold in the concession stand. If you're the banquet chair, you get to determine where we have the banquet. So you might want to add some of those little benefits in there because some people get excited. It's their kid's senior year or something, and they want to make some decisions about decorations or locations. So the benefit can be helpful. The other thing that you can do is make some training videos. So if you have a great person right now running your concessions or as your treasurer, have them make just a small series of 2 to 3 minute videos on their phone and show things like this is how you turn on the popcorn machine, and this is how you manage the credit card device, and this is how you run the cookie machine, or this is how I do a reconcile. Then store those videos. If you're in Booster Hub, put it in your file manager. If you're using some other tool like Google Drive, you can put it there. And then you have a way to show people how to do the role because sometimes people are afraid of what they don't know. So if you say, hey, we've got some great tips and videos to get you started, so you're going to start out with some knowledge on this position, people are more likely to take it on. So you want to make the ask effective. So here's some things that we see is if you use a personal invitation, people are 3 to 4 times more likely to say yes. So I know this is hard. You're busy, you've got a lot of things going on, but it's May and it's a good time to start building a big strategic plan like this because you're ahead of the game, you're ahead of the season. But this is where you can reach out with those personal emails or texts and say to someone, hey, we're really trying to add some people to the booster club this year. Would you be interested in serving this role? And you'll find that a lot of people are more responsive to that kind of invitation rather than a big email or a big text that says, hey, we need volunteers. You better get out here and do it. So think about sending some personal invitations. And you can also do that in person. I find that's pretty effective because people have a tougher time saying no when they're right in front of you. Highlight again the benefit of the position, like, hey, the banquet chair gets to, make all the decisions about the banquet. Then share why it's important. If we don't get the concession stand up and running this year, the booster club's going to lose $30,000 to $40,000. That's going to impact our band fees, or that's going to make it so our kids can't travel to the away tournament this year. I don't like to focus too much on the negative. You really want to highlight the positive. So you want to make sure not like this is what we're going to lose, but this is what we gain by doing this. And then follow the rule of seven. If you watch our webinars, I say this almost every webinar, but it's really important. Anytime you're communicating to people, you need to say it 7 times. So for big general volunteer requests, you're going to need to say it 7 times. If you have a big event going, you're going to need to say it 7 times for the big event. So you really need to think about how many times have I communicated this? And that doesn't mean 7 emails, but it means once in your app, once in your social media, a couple of emails, then maybe an announcement at a performance or a game. But people need to hear the message 7 times before they actually will do something about it. I wanted to share a little story about Joe. Joe's a real guy from my former booster club, and when my daughter was a freshman, I was asked to be the president of the booster club, primarily because they hadn't done any recruiting, so there wasn't anyone ready to step into the president role. And there were some great gals that were leading the booster club, some great people doing a great job. But they were what I call Debbie Do Everything. They kept it all to themselves. They made all the decisions. They got the work done. They did a beautiful job, but they really didn't share it with anybody else. The one thing that they did do was ask every parent to work a concession shift. And they assigned those shifts for people who didn't sign up. Well, Joe was assigned concession shifts, but he never showed up. So when we were reviewing the transfer of the booster club, they said, oh my gosh, Joe's terrible. He never shows up for anything. We give him volunteer positions, but he's never there. So he's just not an active participant. I happened to be sitting next to Joe at a volleyball game, and I said, hey, Joe, we're looking to get more people involved in the booster club this year. Would you be interested in participating? Joe put his hand right up and he's like, absolutely. I would love to be the chair of the season kickoff. I was kind of flabbergasted because I thought this guy never shows up. That's what they've told me. But he was really excited to participate. When I went back and talked to the people that had been managing things, who were going to be, this was their senior year, they were like, absolutely not. He's not going to do the work. We're not happy with this. And I said, well, let's give it a try. Joe performed flawlessly. He showed up for everything. He went above and beyond. He built some custom presentation things for our season kickoff, and it was really, really a great partnership. The people who had been running the booster club actually ended up working with him, and they had a great time. So sometimes what they need is a personal invitation, a defined and a leadership role, and a successful outcome. And then make sure that you don't have that kind of Debbie do everything approach, because if you don't delegate and you don't create actual work for these people to do, then they jump in all excited and then they'll retract and go, there's nothing for me to do because Robin's doing it all. I don't need to do that. So just remember Joe when you're trying to recruit volunteers. When we talk about appreciation, one way to get volunteers to come back over and over again is to make sure you offer appreciation. So I call this retention through appreciation. Now, it's really hard as the booster club president or the vice president or one of the officers because you are putting in the time. And I know that you're doing all the volunteering, but now you got to thank all these people who are probably putting in less time than you are. But it's a great way to boost that volunteer base and get more people involved. So I recommend creating a recognition program. This can be something like a certificate, or I've seen some booster clubs make a little volunteer pin for every year and give them out at their banquet, and everyone can wear it proudly that they volunteered this year. You want to help create a community amongst your volunteers. So you may want to have a volunteer happy hour or volunteer breakfast, so that everyone can come together and feel appreciated, perhaps before or after an event. You want to celebrate success. So I talked a little bit about 100% participation. So that's where you can ask your entire program, you can put out an initiative that says, we would like to get 100% of our families to volunteer this season. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to volunteer at the same level, but if you can get everyone to take one shift, every family, and call that your 100% participation, it's such a big success for the program. And we find that booster clubs that have really high volunteer rates also do really well in fundraising, also do really well in fans showing up. And that's what you're there to do. So track that and see it and publish it, get it out there. Hey, we're at 85% participation. We just need 15% more to get to our 100% participation. And what I do is I find the group that hasn't participated and they get that email like twice as often as everyone else. So you make sure that you're targeting the group that's not participating and then doing that through various channels so that they have a way to get that information. And then most importantly, make it fun. It's really easy when you're exhausted and tired and you don't have enough volunteers to kind of get mad and say, hey, if we can't get enough volunteers, we're not doing this. We're going to take this away. And when you start going in that direction, people start retracting and they don't want to participate. So you've always got to keep the spirit of fun. We're out there for the kids. We're doing this. Make it fun. When you're working the concession stand, have a good time. Don't be the lady that counts the chips and gets mad at people if they don't put enough chips in the dish. We're just having a good time out there volunteering. Here's our quick volunteer tips and tricks list. Offer free concessions to your volunteers. If they're working concession stand or they're working a tournament, give them a free meal. The little bit of cost that it'll cost you to do that, will pay back. People appreciate it. I talked about creating a pin and having a ceremony at your banquet. Have a volunteer appreciation happy hour or breakfast. Make volunteer shirts, or they get other items like maybe parking or seats, that reserve seats that you don't have to pay for. Have the students put together a thank you card or video and share that with all the volunteers. You want to make sure that you're offering flexible volunteer times. There are some people that they just can't fit it in. The hours in the day just don't work, but give them an opportunity to volunteer from home, some sort of activity that they could do at home, and get those volunteer hours in. Be sure to highlight your volunteers. You could do that, volunteer of the month in the newsletter or on social media or the week even. Don't forget your alumni. Once a band mom, always a band mom. So I think a lot of people think, oh, those people are gone, they're out of the program. But let me tell you, if you've been actively involved in any booster program, you're still going to want to go back and visit from time to time. Now, it might not be the next year. So, my kids have graduated, they're freshmen in college. I've got a lot going on. It's not the year to ask me. But 2 or 3 years later, when my world is settled down and I'm now an empty nester, I'd probably love to come out and volunteer for the program. Maybe create like an alumni concession shift or an alumni, the alumni are going to run the season kickoff. And that way I can get together with all those parents I used to work with. I'd love to do that. And then use technology that makes it easy. So don't make your volunteers have to work hard to search for a link somewhere or go find it someplace. Create it, use a tool or an app that's easy. Booster Hub's a great option. We've got the volunteer module. You go right there, it lists all the opportunities. You click which one you've got, and you're signed up, ready to go. One other thing I wanted to mention is don't get into the trap of paying for volunteer hours with like reduced fees. If your organization is a nonprofit, you can't do that because it impacts uh, essentially creates an individual fundraising account, and that's not a really good practice. So you don't want to give discounts or things for volunteers. So look for other ways to give incentives for people to volunteer. So let's move on to the sponsor challenge. So again, I want to think in sponsors in broad terms. And again, we're not going to have quick fixes here. These are going to be more like strategic plans, which I know is not what you want to hear. You want to know, how can I get more sponsors today? The good news again is it's May right now. So it's a good time to build out that plan so that you'll be ready for season. So when you're looking to build out your sponsorship program, you want to look at the value of your sponsorship packages. We're going to talk about ways to see what the value is and sell the value. And then you want to create a formal sponsor outreach process. You'll want to have someone chair that process. So you'll want to recruit a volunteer to chair the sponsorship process. See how that works together. And then you're going to want to build long-term partnerships. So we'd love to have the sponsors for multiple years. So you can definitely find some ways to get sponsors involved in your community and have them come back year after year. So I hear from a lot of boosters, we don't have anything to offer the sponsors. I mean, all we have is just our communications, and maybe you don't even have a gym or a field where you can hang a banner. And I say, well, let's break it down. Let's look at it. So first of all, boosters have a lot of physical advertising to offer. So if you're playing in a gym, you've got the walls of the gym. If you're in a marching band, you've got fences at the football stadium, perhaps even an equipment trailer. You've got spirit wear you can put items on, and usually lots of advertising places and scoreboards and things like that. So it's one of the few physical advertising spaces left that really works and really has a lot of views. So start with that. Now let's talk about your website. If you don't have a website, you need one. If your website doesn't have your sponsors on it, it should. And let's highlight those sponsors. In Booster Hub, our websites have sponsors on every page because we think that gives them great visibility. If you're sending emails every week or you run a newsletter, you've got space in those newsletters to put your sponsor logos. It's another great way to give them value and visibility. Your social media, you should have a social media page. Think of that as kind of a public presence of your organization, and great ways to highlight sponsors and get some value there. At your events, you can do in-person recognition for sponsors. So this is where you announce the sponsor's name at the event and call them out, maybe give them a chance to stand up in the crowd if they're there. That's a great way to recognize your sponsors. And if you're a school program with any kind of number of students involved, you all of a sudden have 50, 100, 500 people there that are hearing that sponsor's name. And that's great value for your sponsors. We're starting to see a trend where programs are naming tournaments or festivals after sponsors. So, sort of like we've seen with the professional stadiums and things like that. So, you may get a local sponsor to be the sponsor of the tournament. You can offer student promotion. So at my former booster club, we had students go out to our sponsors, make little 1-minute videos, basically reels that we put on social media. Those were a big hit, and we had a lot of sponsors call us, businesses call us wanting to be sponsors after they saw those videos. So that's a great opportunity there. And then as we talked, you can put the logo on the spirit wear. So, spirit wear is so great because kids, they're growing in high school, so you're buying t-shirts every year, so you're always getting a new t-shirt. It's a great way to highlight your program and put a sponsor on there, so you've got both. Also a great way to fundraise for your program, so definitely look into options for spirit wear. So let's just look at a sample. What does the reach look like? Like, what's the reach? How many people are we getting this sponsor logo out to. So this is just an estimate here. So if you're a marching band or football team, you probably have 5 or 10,000 people at your home games, and you're doing 10 or 15 games a year. Actually, this one's a 750 attendance for 15 games a year. But you're starting to talk about tens of thousands of people. You don't get that kind of advertising anymore, particularly physical advertising. If you've got a tournament weekend and you've got 20 teams coming in or 10 other marching bands coming in to compete, your visibility goes way up. Social media visibility, and then even like practice fields. If you've got students out there every day and your high school has 2,000 students, that's 2,000 views, every day. And then we'll look at the digital reach breakdown. You've got your website, so you can see the number of annual visitors there. Again, we talked about social media. If you're sending an email newsletter every week to 200 families and you send it every week, that starts to be thousands of impressions of a logo. And even if you're sharing photos of your events online. So think about those things as you're selling the value to your sponsors. So, how should you package your sponsorships? Well, you'll want to focus on the students and the outcome. So, um, a lot of businesses will just get behind a booster club because it's for the kids. And so you always want to keep that at front and center is this is for the students. This is for the golf team. This is for the marching band. This is for the volleyball team. We really want to help these students out. Funding's been cut back, so sponsorships are really important. When you're creating your amounts, your levels, when you sell them, your highest level should have 1 to 2 sponsors. If you have 5 sponsors at your highest level, you've priced it too low. So you really want that highest level to be 1 or 2 businesses. So we have a lot of programs in Booster Hub that have $10,000 and $20,000 sponsorships, and they get sold. We have a lot that have $2,500 and $5,000 level sponsorships. So if you're at 500, it's your highest level, you need to rethink that because you probably have more value than that. Of course, it depends on your area and your demographic as well. But again, after you've sold your sponsorships for the season, again, if you have 5 at the top, your top level is too low. You want to make the sponsorship packages easy to deliver. So I've seen some programs like we have this sponsorship and they pay $500 and then they get 2 t-shirts and then $100 goes over here to this program. And then we get them season tickets and they make it so complicated that when they sell a sponsorship, the boosters now have to spend 3 days just calculating where everything's going. And then they have to call the district office to get the tickets. They have to do all these things. So you want to make sure that the things that you're putting in your sponsorship package are really easy for you to deliver. So if you're doing t-shirts or something, use a print on demand service. Like we have that in Booster Hub merch. You want to sell t-shirts in your sponsorships, just add them to the package. When the sponsor checks out, the t-shirts ship directly to them. So you want to think about that. You want to create a visual comparison, so probably on your website or a PDF form. Don't get into the letter and then there's a form and you submit a check. I mean, that's just 10 years ago. People want an email, they want a link, they want to pay online, they want to get their credit card points. There's not going to be too many businesses that are going to be worried about credit card fees, particularly because it's time factor. They just want to go in, plug their information and be done. So make it easy for them to do that. And then add some of those metrics like the visibility. This is how many people are going to see this logo on our website or in this ad. Here's just a sample of a PDF flyer, just a sample that we made to show the levels and the investment and then the various things that you might be getting for your investment. So something simple like this, again, you can set it up on your website or you can add a PDF form. Something like that may be helpful for your sponsors to see it all on one page. Now that you've got a way to set up the levels, let's talk about how to manage and promote the sponsorship. So you'll want to create a dedicated position within Elect. Sponsorships are hard. You're going to have to go out and talk to businesses and sell them and keep track of them. they're also very important to your program. So you want a dedicated role for your sponsorships. I generally give this to the vice president. I think it's a great place for them to get to know the supporters of the organization. They know the need from the top down, and they serve a high role in the organization. And then give them an elect who can help them do it. So you've got two people on the job. I don't recommend this for the president. The president should be running the booster club. You're going to talk to the sponsors. You may bring in some sponsors and you may influence some sponsors, but being in charge of the sponsors is just really too much for the president to do. You want to create a specific plan for outreach. This is the list. This is how many times we're going to contact them. This is who has contacted them. It's really important to connect within your community. So, as much as we want to get outside of your current family base for sponsorship, the reality is the majority of your sponsors are going to come from friends and family of your current student participants. So, if you have an incoming group, such as freshmen coming into your group, you're really going to want to know what family businesses and supporters are in that group so that you can reach out to those people because you have a higher likelihood of getting them involved. It doesn't usually work to send a list and say, if you know anybody who wants to sponsor, here's the list. It's good to definitely include it in your communications because you will get a couple that way, but you don't want that to be your only plan. It's not going to be very effective. I like to get the students involved and have them email or text or visit local businesses. Our students have gotten so busy, we don't see much of this anymore. But I do find that when the student goes and asks, the response rate is higher because the student's asking to help support their program. Make sure that they're sharing that unique value, those that reach that you're getting and the audiences that you're getting to. Make it really easy for them to commit. Again, an email with a link to purchase is really easy. So I highly recommend that. Follow that rule of 7. So you're contacting them 7 times. And then create a deadline for urgency and also for ease for you. If you need to create all the banners for the gym by a certain date, you need to order the t-shirts by a certain date, that deadline really helps you, but it also helps them make a decision. So it's not just out there and hanging like, we need all sponsorships in by August the 1st. If you're interested, please let us know by, July 31st. So be sure to put a deadline in your communications. Now, once you have the sponsors, make them part of your community. So give them personal invitations to all your events. And this is where the president can start reaching out. If you're doing a meet the team or a season kickoff, make a sponsor table, give them a front row table or a personal meet and greet with the team. Give them personal recognition at events. So you have the items that they're going to pay for, but coming in and just giving them a big thank you, when you're announcing the team, really can carry a lot of weight. Again, sponsor only meet and greets, include them in traditions. If you're doing a state send off or again, some sort of maybe you're doing a mom's game or something like that. Get your sponsors involved. They love to come out and do those things. Send thank you cards or thank you plaques or thank you certificates to your sponsors. That really goes a long way and they really appreciate it. And then have your students create thank you videos or have the students write the thank you notes. That also goes a long way as well. Here's our quick list of tips and tricks for sponsorships, just some ideas. Have a sponsor your water for the season and put their logo on your water bottles. If you're selling at concession stand or providing to students, this is a great way to get the logo out there and show to a lot of people. Again, we're seeing more named tournament sponsors, or if you're doing a concert or a festival, it's the Joe's Fried Chicken Marching Band Festival. So, and you can bring in some big dollars with those big named events. Have them direct the band or be an honorary coach for a game. You can add that into your sponsorship levels or make that its own sponsorship. Have their logo added to spirit wear. Again, another great way. Those shirts are running all around school for the whole year and all around town. Have your students make those little 1 minute advertising videos. People love it. The students' family is going to share it. They love to see their kids doing things. Share it on your social media, tag the business, get them involved. It's a really great way to build community around your program. It also helps build your fan base, which is really great too. Have a sponsor breakfast for networking. So all your sponsors get to come in and meet each other. This is a great one, sponsor renewal invoice. So a couple of our booster clubs have started this. So they just send an email at the beginning of the next season with a link to pay for a renewal for your sponsorship. It was great that we had it last year. We assume you want to renew. Here's the link. And they get about a 20 to 30% return on that. So there's, 1/3 of your sponsorship done for the season just by sending those renewal invoices. You can do things like a sponsor player of the game. So, you can have the Joe's Barbecue player of the game every week. Give that sponsor some highlights. And again, you can add it as either one of the levels or its own independent sponsorship, or a meal or equipment sponsor. So sometimes sponsors like to see real tangible packages, things that they're actually going to be supporting and paying for the program. Team meals and things like that, or equipment sponsors is a great way to do that. And be flexible. So you may set your packages, but then the sponsor may say, "Hey, I'd like to do something that feels like a little more purposeful." Well, then you can come back with one of these ideas. So just to recap, again, on both of these, you need to make an overall plan, and it takes time. So there's no magic wand, but the good news is right now you're in a part of the season where you have the time. So on the volunteer challenge, start early. Make sure that you get involved at that very first parent meeting of the season, letting people know, hey, did you know it takes 1,600 volunteer slots to run the average marching band for a season? And that's how many we have. And we have 300 families. So you do the math. We need all of you to volunteer 3 or 4 times. Plus, we have some great board positions available. Map the need, get all those roles out there, and then publish that, get it out there so people know, hey, we've got a couple of spots open in the Booster Club. This is what those spots do. This is how much time it takes. We'd love to get you involved, giving people the ability to have ownership of their role and be a leader in the program. Ask again and again and again and again until we get to 7 or 8 times. Thank and thank again and again. You might not need to get to 7, but let's thank them 2 or 3 times. And then really try for that 100% participation. I promise you, people get excited about this, especially if you communicate it well and you get the measurement up there. This is where we are. We're almost there. We just need 4 more families to participate. You might not get to 100%, but I bet you're going to get a lot further than you got without it. And on the sponsorship challenge, you're going to want to make a plan, have a leader who's going to execute your plan, show the value of those sponsorships, make it really easy for those sponsors to commit and click the link and pay, and then thank them again and again and again. Thank you for taking time to watch our webinar. We'd love to have you join some of our live webinar series. You can follow us on social media for those times and dates, and join our boosted volunteer communities. We've got them on Facebook and LinkedIn, and also connect with me, Robin Eisler, on LinkedIn. I do a lot of thought leadership on booster clubs and how to run a nonprofit well, and would love to share those ideas with you. We look forward to helping you knock it out of the park.